It is in our ability to hold people accountable during times of change that we truly demonstrate effective leadership. While some may question the importance of accountability during stressful situations, success lies in setting clear expectations and having open conversations about baseline core behaviors. These are the words of today's guest, Leah. And what she's talking about here is essentially how important accountability and holding people to account during times of change truly is. Without accountability, essentially, it becomes the Wild West. And anyone can do anything. But the importance of it during times of change is that we need to keep everyone on the same path towards the desired end state, whatever that change may be. And without accountability, there's no way in hell you're going to achieve this. So, who is this guest, Leah Mether, anyway? Well, she is a communication expert, and she really focuses in on the soft skills areas. In particular, she talks about her 5 C's model of communication. And you're going to hear about that throughout this podcast episode as well. She has a diverse range of clients from Opus to Health Services, Department of Environmental, Land, Watering, and Planning. She has been in the industry for over 15 years and has worked with thousands of clients and 2 books to her name. So, you know what? She knows what she's talking about. That's why she's here on the podcast, because I only go looking for the best guests possible for you. And I avoid just the churn and the aura around certain guests out there. I'm not saying that they're not plausible or it's not important stuff that they talk about, but rather I want to make sure you get a breadth of experience and guests. That's why I find a lot of these authors like Leah for you, because it gives you something tangible to work with. Especially what you're going to get out of this episode is the 5 C's model of communication. In this episode, we talk about a whole range of topics, such as why it's so crucial to lead yourself, your people, and your organization, how and why you must take care of people's emotions, why realizing mistakes and showing vulnerability is so important as leaders, how leaders can skip people who are problematic, and why everyone can improve by not fearing vulnerability, amongst many other topics. So I throw in a few anecdotal stories about my experiences in here. No doubt you will enjoy them. And ultimately, what you're going to get out of this is how to communicate with people and how you can take that and communicate change with your team. So it is an ever important topic because, as I say right in the beginning of the episode, change is always happening. It is continuously around us. The world is changing on a daily basis, and we need to keep up with it as leaders. In fact, we need to get ahead of it. And the only way we can get ahead of it is by getting our teams on board and taking them along for the ride. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Leah Mether. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the 3 domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast on leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Leah Mether, welcome to the show. So good to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Scott, and thanks to everyone who's listening.
Oh, that's awesome. So today we're talking about leading change, which is an awesome topic. I enjoy because I find it so important because I don't know how often I've said this on the show, but it still holds true. Change is the ever constant. Like we can get off this podcast and something massive can change in the world. You just never know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, so many leaders out there, I shouldn't say whine or gripe, but they effectively kind of complain that change is so hard. Like, oh my God, it's so hard to get these changes. We got to go down this route. We got to go this direction, but I just can't get my team to come with me. Why is that in the first place?
It's a really good question because you're right. There is change all around us. We've all probably heard that quote, the only constant is change. And as a species, humans are actually really adaptable. We've seen that through things like COVID. However, our brains are wired for comfort and certainty. We like predictability. We like patterns. That's why we create habits. And this is a really primitive part of our brain in action. It's the amygdala kicking in. And when change happens to humans, our very first instinct is to perceive it as a threat. So it does. Our very first instinct, that base human instinct, is usually, and we've all heard fight, flight, freeze. Okay. And so when the change happens, the challenge for us, this is at an individual level in the first instance, is to go, okay, I'm having this very human instinctual response, but now what's my next step? Where do I go from here? And that's hopefully, as evolved humans, we are starting to get better at that. But I think the reality is when we are leaders and we're leading people through change or leading a change, we actually have to understand that that is the instinctual response. And not be so big part of my work is around how do we understand how humans work and deal with those feelings to support people through change so they're less likely to resist it. I do still come across a lot of leaders who, similar to what you said, will say things like, oh, why can't my people just get on with it? Why can't they just get on with it? Why are they resisting? And it's because those leaders aren't understanding the human experience. And that's often what holds them back.
So, what I'm hearing from you, it seems to be a serious gap in the good old emotional intelligence sphere, which we hear a lot of talk about these days. I like to refer to EI as just like, hey, just don't be an a-hole. Just right, just listen to your people and be kind. Now, I'm sure you might have a little bit deeper explanation to that from your standpoint, but that's kind of where I sit.
I'm a big fan for just say it how it is, right? And yes, there's the depth that goes behind it, but you're spot on. I still do come across, like I said, a lot of leaders who say, oh, is this the soft, fluffy stuff? I don't do emotions, Leah. I don't do feelings. They don't belong in the workplace. Can't people just get on with it? And my response to those leaders, and there's still plenty of them around, although I would suggest they're not leaders at all. They might be managers, but leadership's about people. So if you're not caring about this stuff, you're not really a leader. But Brene Brown has a great quote, and, I'll paraphrase it here, but essentially she says, if leaders don't invest time dealing with the feelings and emotions of their people, expect to waste a considerable amount of time dealing with their problems and resistance instead. So when I'm working with those leaders who maybe are a bit old school, they don't understand or have that awareness of emotional intelligence and why it's important to actually care about your people's feelings. What I say to them is, if you want to get results, this isn't just the right thing to do because it's caring for your people, although there is that element too. If you want to get results, if you want a chance of getting your people through change more smoothly, more effectively, this is actually also the smart thing to do. If your people feel like you genuinely care about them, that you're taking interest in their concerns during a change, and then you're supporting them through, they're going to move through it a lot quicker than if you just bullet a gate try to steamroll a change through.
You, at the beginning there, highlighted the tagline of this show, which is lead, don't boss.
Mm-hmm.
And, right, and
Yep.
that's effective. You effectively highlighted that, because that's kind of like those people are what I refer to as bosses. You said it eloquently, like these aren't even leaders. I'm like, yep, bang on. Those are what I refer to as quote unquote bosses, right? And
Yeah.
those,
I was just going to
those.
jump in and say there, I often have to spend time in the training programs I run and the workshops actually explaining the difference between leadership and management to people in leadership positions. A lot don't actually even understand that there's a difference. But the way I explain it is, management's about tasks, leadership's about people. Management relies on a hierarchy. Management relies on more of that, I'm going to tell you what to do and expect you to follow because I am your boss and you will do it for me. Whereas leadership empowers people. And to be a true leader, people need to want to follow you, not because they have to, but because they want to. And again, I still get some resistance to this idea from some of those old school bosses or managers. And if they say, Leah, why should I get on board with this people part? Why should I, invest in this? I say, well, do you want people to do their best work for you or not? Because it really comes down to that. If you are a good manager and just tell people, command and control, focus on the tasks, you're not so much into the people bit of leadership, you might be able to do the management piece, but people will do what you say out of maybe fear and obligation or because they have to, but they will never go over and above for you. They will do baseline. We do our best work for leaders that we want to do great work for. So again, it's not just the right thing to do, it's the strategically smart thing to do if you want to be a high-performing leader who gets high-performance results.
And ironically, this show is called Peak Performance Leadership. Imagine that, right?
Imagine. And here's the thing, peak performance leadership is not just about getting the peak performance out of your people. It's modeling the behavior you want to see in them. You cannot lead other people effectively unless you first lead yourself.
You actually have hit my structure of basically my entire ecosystem almost completely on the head, because I refer to my 3 domains of leadership. So leading yourself, which you just talked about, leading your people, which we've been talking about, and I'm sure we're going to go down this whole rabbit hole as well. And as leading your organization, i.e., the institution in which you lead, right? So those are, to me, that is the complete picture of leadership. Because you can lead your team, but guess what? There's plenty of examples out there of leaders who failed to lead themselves and watched their companies crumble, or leaders
absolutely.
out there who fail to lead their organization. Maybe that's a cultural thing, right? They fail to the proper culture inside the organization. Uber, for example, had huge problems quite some time, and crumbling. So you got to lead across the spectrum. It can't just be one isolated pocket.
Yeah, and I very much have a similar 3-domain structure in the work I do. We're obviously really aligned in those ideas because I talk about leading self, leading others, and leading together, which is that organizational piece. And you do need all 3 to lead effectively. But what I find is it's amazing how many leaders want to start with everyone else. They want to start with everyone else. And they will often come to me and say, Leah, I really need help dealing with this tricky person in my team. Can you help me out with them? And I always say, yeah, absolutely, we can get to them, but let's start with you. Now, you can imagine, Scott, there can be some resistance to that from some leaders who say, oh, no, this isn't about me. This is about that other person, that problem person. That may be the case, but let's start with you. We have to lead from the inside out, and we have to start by really getting conscious about how we're showing up. And if we are modeling the behavior we want to see from others, you can't lead people through change effectively if you're telling people how you want them to show up, but you're running around like the sky is falling down, modeling behavior that's totally at odds with that.
You are reminding me of I don't know if funny is the right word here, because it's actually a bit of, it's actually kind of disgusting story at the same time. But I'll go down the rabbit hole anyway, because I think it fits into this topic. So I run a free Facebook group called Leadership Skills for Managers Who Want to Be Leaders, Not Bosses. For the listener out there, you can always jump in if you're not there. Just go to lead.boss.com/group and that'll bring you right to it. So you don't have to go searching for it. Anyway, so I threw up a question. I like to throw up questions every now and then, ask the almost 11,000 people in there. It's crazy. What are they struggling with right now? And you know what one gentleman replied with?
What?
My wife won't listen. I was like, so it took me some time. I had all kinds of other things going on, the usual communication problems, all the other standard problems that you see. And it took me a while to wonder. I'm like, how, one, am I even going to respond to it? Mm-hmm. And two, how do I actually respond to it? Not in a critical way, but in a positive way. So I sat on it for a little while, and then I finally said, okay, yes, I am going to respond, and here how I'm going to respond to it. And it was simple. Have you tried to listen first?
Yeah.
Right? Just what you just said, right? Us as leaders, we have to listen first. The disgusting part of that was the gentleman's next response which was, the world would be a horrible place if we all listened to our wives. And I'm like, that's when the conversation basically went sideways. And I kind of ended it after that. But the moral of the story is that if you as a leader, you're finding problems. Now, I don't know the actual statistic here, but it's significantly high. I mean, like 80s, 90s ballpark, where you're actually the problem. And this is why you need to start with yourself first.
Yeah.
If you're having a problem with one of your team members, you're having a problem with outcomes, you're not getting the results you expect or need or want, start with you first.
Yeah, and that story captures it perfectly, right? She's never going to listen to him if he never listens to her. And you can picture it. You can picture it in workplaces as well, where it ends up with people just talking at each other. And talking at each other, no one's listening. Everyone's just getting louder as they spew their opinion at each other, and we walk away, everyone frustrated because no one's listening to me. The other point I want to make here when we're talking about lead yourself first, I think some leaders hear that and they are scared of the vulnerability. They worry that, but then people are going to think I'm not a great leader, or I've got to put on this facade. But here's the thing: when it comes to leadership or communication, the key things that I teach, no one gets it right all the time. No one is the perfect communicator or leader. Everyone can improve, and we have to have the humility to understand and know that we're always learning. This is never something you can say, I did communication or leadership training this one time, so that's my tick box, and I'm done. I've done that. And it's funny, I've been brought into organizations before by leaders who will say, Leah, I want you to train my team. And again, I always say to them, let's start with you, or ask the question, will you be part of the training? Will you be sitting in on the training? And I have had leaders before say to me, look, I've done communication training before, or I've done leadership training before. I'm not sitting in on this one. And the minute I hear that, it's like a big red siren going off above my head going, ooh, I'm pretty sure I know what the issue in this organisation is. And on the feedback forms at the end of my sessions, one of the questions is always, who else would benefit from this training, or who else would you recommend participate in the training? And in those situations where even when I've tried to get the leader there, maybe they've said, no, they're not being part of it. And I'm even skeptical about working in those organisations. Everyone writes that person's name, because that's the issue. So if people are listening going, oh, I think I'm pretty good at this stuff. I think I'm doing a good job. You might be, and great if you are, but you can still do better, because you're human and none of us get it right all the time. I often say at the start of my workshops, I teach this stuff for a living. I've written 2 books on leadership and communication. I theoretically know all of this stuff. I still stuff it up all the time. I still get it wrong all the time, because I'm human. I'm an emotion-driven being like every human is. Some days I have good days and bad days. I do my best to regulate myself and live everything that I teach. But do I stuff it up sometimes? Yes, I do. And I need to have the courage and vulnerability when that happens to have an awareness that it's happened and then take steps to remedy that. But, thinking that we're perfect and we can't improve here, that's one of the biggest blockers to leadership development.
Can't agree with you more. I actually got another funny anecdotal story. So, as I was telling you before we hit record, by day I'm a senior Canadian Army officer, and my current job role is that I teach at one of our education institutions. I teach operational planning to our junior officers who are up and coming. And yesterday I was actually giving a chat to them after they had to do a presentation. And I was going over some, points for improvement for all the entire team. And one of the gentlemen used the whiteboard and he was drawing a picture and he was explaining things. And, he did the old, fatal error, right? Turned his back to his audience, drew the picture and was talking as he was drawing the picture and so on. So I literally go up to the exact same whiteboard and start saying, listen, this is what you guys, when you go and you're drawing a picture, and then I started drawing a random picture, and then I was caught myself mid-act. And I'm like, and here I am doing the exact same mistake I'm correcting you for.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like, listen, and I basically said the same thing. Like, yeah, we all don't get it perfect. Point, prove it, right? And then I just showed them, modeled the proper way. But you got to have, I think you kind of got to have the courage just to laugh at yourself sometimes.
Yeah. And
we
to
take
call
ourselves
that out,
too
right?
serious.
Yeah, to call that out as well. Like, that can be the light point, but also the real teachable moment in that session you ran yesterday, because it's when you're doing the same thing that you can turn around to the class and go, oh my goodness, and here I am doing exactly what I just said not to do. Like, this is how easy it is, how we have to be aware of it. And it's when your team see you acknowledging your areas of improvement as a leader, or the things that you're working on, or the mistakes you made. That old school belief that leaders don't make mistakes and you have to be right all the time and have all the answers and not get it wrong and not show vulnerability, it creates disconnection. And if you want your people to be able to own up to their mistakes and acknowledge their areas of improvement, we need to model that behavior as leaders. It doesn't mean confessing all your sins to your people and so that they don't have faith that you know what you're doing. But it is sharing with them that, yes, you might be their leader and you're obviously trying to do a great job, but you are human too. And you are working on this stuff too. And it creates so much connection, respect, but also gives your people permission to be learning skills as well.
So I'm hearing the critic in my head right now, because we started this conversation off about change and change management, and right? And you probably know where I'm going with this. So if I'm the leader and I'm supposed to be able to be vulnerable and humble and all this stuff and say, oh, I don't know everything, I don't know how this is going to go, but still follow me, the critic would turn around and say to you, well, how am I supposed to motivate, inspire, and get the team behind me when I'm supposed to be taking down this path where people are uncomfortable. We don't know what's next,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I know we need to get there, but I can't convince them we need to get there. But if I'm going to do all this, soft stuff and be humble and look vulnerable and not be strong all the time, they're not going to follow me because they're going to be scared that I'm going to be taking down the wrong path. What do you say to those folks?
Well, first off, my first book's called Soft is the New Hard, and that's a play on the idea that soft skills are somehow this fluffy extra. They're the hardest part, right? The stuff we're talking about here, the peopling, the leadership, these skills aren't the easy bit. The technical parts of our job are the easier bit often. It's the peopling that is the tricky bit. So you're right, there has to be a balance here of warmth and strength, of clarity and curiosity, of of being the person who people have faith that you're going to lead them through change the best way possible, even if you don't have all of the answers yet. Now, I want to make a quick distinction for listeners in the work that I do around leading through change. And that's the difference between leading through change and leading change. And this goes to the point you made about, sometimes as leaders, we don't have all the answers, and how can we still get people to follow us when there is uncertainty? My new book is called Steer Through the Storm, How to Communicate and Lead Courageously Through Change. And it is about leading through change. How that differs to leading change is, and I was approached by one of my clients about that sparked off the idea for this book. He said, Leah, have you got anything on leading people through change? Change that is happening whether you like it or not. It's not necessarily your change. You're not necessarily leading the change. It might be government's made a decision, there's new regulations coming in, or your board, or if you're in an international company, the parent organization has made this decision. And you're a leader somewhere in the middle. You might be the CEO, you might be a middle manager, and you're the person who has to lead your people through it. The change impacts your team. You have to steer them through it, but it's not your change. You don't necessarily like the change yourself. There's not necessarily a win in it for your people, but you somehow have to get them to follow you through. So that's where my work is pitched. It is exactly as you said. It's in that space that's hard, where you don't have all the answers, it's uncertain, and you might not be on board as well. So how do we lead people more effectively through that space? There is a framework that I teach in the book, but in terms of what are some of the quick pieces here that we can do as leaders, part of it is providing clarity to your people, and you can provide some clarity even in uncertain times. So thinking about how you want your team to navigate the change, how you want to show up as a leader through the change. So that can be saying something to your team, like COVID's a great example. No one knew what was going on or how we were getting through that. It's giving your people the confidence by saying something like, you know what, there is a lot of uncertainty around us at the moment, but the commitment I make to you as your leader is I'm going to lead you through this with, and whatever those key things are for you. It might be getting the team together and saying, this is going to get hard, it's going to get tricky, there's the potential for things to get wobbly and for conflicts to arise. How do we want to get through this behaviorally? What do we want to do? What do we not want to do? It can be using a framework, and this is a very simple 4-part framework for communicating during uncertainty, where we say, here's what I know, that's the first point, and number 2, here's what I'm doing about it. Now, in uncertain times, that's where leaders often stop. They say, here's what I know and here's what I'm doing about it. And then we walk away going, and I don't have those other answers people want, so I'm not going to say anything about that. But here's the problem. You can bet your bottom dollar that bit you have left out, the big elephant in the room, that's what everyone in your team is talking about and getting concerned about and worried about. And do you have it together as a leader? So I actually encourage leaders to name it. So the third point in this structure is, what don't we know? And tell your people that. I know a lot of you have got questions about whether we've got funding for the new financial year. The answer is, I don't know that yet either. And the fourth step in this framework is what you're doing about what you don't know. So it might be, I don't have that answer either yet. However, the commitment I make to you is that I am asking the questions, I am advocating for our team to the board, and as soon as I have more information, I'm going to communicate that to you. So again, just really quickly, what you know, what you're doing about it, what you don't know, and how you're going to let your people know, or the work you're doing in the background to find out. So through all of this, and how do we balance that, the soft stuff, with giving people faith in us? It really is that delicate balance of doing both. It's doing the thinking and giving the reassurance that as a leader, you are here to steer people through them. You're modeling the behavior, you're doing what you can, you're communicating as much as you can and being as transparent as possible. But you're also supporting your people and getting curious. You should care about why they don't like the change. That gives you information to help lead them. It gives you information about the questions to ask. But it is that balance. And the other balance here, as I wind up this long answer, I appreciate, the other answer here is we do need to balance empathy and accountability. Yes, you need to care about your people and support them and try to understand what's going on for them and be compassionate and help them through. But you do still need them to do a job. Okay, that's the reality. You still need them to perform and do a job. So you need the accountability piece there too. But what I find is if you go straight to accountability with no empathy, if you're just saying to your people, oh, I know there's a lot going on, but forget about that. You've just got to focus on doing your job and head down, bum up, and keep focused on doing the work. If you don't empathize, that's when people start getting louder and more upset, more challenging in their behaviours. It is that delicate balance of both.
So many good nuggets in there, from the asking the right questions. That's something I talk about a lot right now. I think as leaders, in the past, I mean past as in like ancient past, I think leaders are, the quote unquote best leaders seen were the ones who had all the answers. I think that's flipped on its head now. I think it's all about the ones who ask the right questions. And I liked how I liked how you finished that last bit about empathy and accountability. And I got a little anecdotal story if you'll humor me for a minute. So I was in charge of a military unit, 200 members. And as a senior officer, we get trained in our military judicial system. So we literally preside over trials, like literally trials of our members for very basically minor infractions. So we don't clog up the true court-martial system. So I had a member, and the first time I met him was when he was standing in front of me during what was referred to as his summary trial. He was late one day. In fact, he was drunk in his bed, and his sergeant had to find them in his room, and and he showed up like 3 hours late for work. So he was charged. And between the time that occurred and he was standing in front of me, he'd gone to AA meetings, he had gone on the rehab program, he had letters stating how well he's done and all this stuff. So, long story short, I found him guilty of the charge. He was late, but I was able to give him a fine, not a fine, but a penalty, kind of like a reprimand. I can't use the word reprimand because that is actually a sentence, shall we say, of a caution. Don't do it again. But what I said to him was, I said, okay, you messed up big time, but I appreciate the work that you've done. So let's see what you got. And that was my challenge to him, as in, let's see if you stay on the right path and stick to it. So fast forward 2 years later, I'm at the end of my tour in this unit, and I sent 6 letters to members' parents, because often what happens is parents, they don't know what their child goes through. And as a parent myself, like I'm thinking like 20 years down the road now, because my boys are still fairly young. I'm like, wouldn't it be amazing to actually know what my boys are up to on work, which is arguably one of the biggest parts of their lives. And I ended up writing 6 letters to some outstanding performing young members, and he turned out to be one of the 6.
Yeah, awesome.
Because he had turned into be such a outstanding member. So yes, accountability was held. But at the same time, I saw where he was at that moment. But more importantly, I saw where he came from.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes we just need to look at it through that lens.
Absolutely. There's so much I love in that. I mean, great, awesome leadership from you in writing those letters. The power that they have, often those small acknowledgements, but specific acknowledgements of people. Yes, for the parent, but also for those 6 people to know that their leader had gone and done something like that, which you did that off your own bat. That's awesome. What I love is you're spot on. Yes, you had to hold him accountable, but here was even the more important part there. He took personal responsibility because he went and took action himself. And that is so, so crucial. There might be some listeners who are thinking, okay, and the reason I suggest there might be is because I often get this question from people in workshops. They go, okay, Leah, so you're saying I have to hold people accountable for their behaviour through change, even though it's stressful, and because we can't just have people, going off the rails, yelling and screaming at people or treating each other poorly. So how do I hold them accountable through change? And my response to that is, where possible, success is in the setup. So if you know there's change coming or things are getting a bit uncertain, and you can do this quite frankly at any time with a team. And I was just out at a power station yesterday working with 2 teams together on this exact work. And it's having the conversation about what are our baseline core behaviours that we commit to living by. Some teams do it in a general sense, but I actually like doing this. If you know change is coming, or it might be the start of a new project, don't assume that people know how to behave under pressure, because we're all different. And your idea of what it looks like might be different to mine. We can't hold people accountable if they don't know what they're being held accountable for. So change is coming. All right, folks, this is going to get tricky. It's going to get hard. We're going to be under pressure for the next few months. During this time, what are the 3 to 5 core behaviours we all commit to living by? And what I don't want is a shopping list. I don't want 20 things you're going to live by, because you won't remember them. And I also don't want one-word responses like respect, because respect is a beautiful word, but your version of respect and mine might look very different. So I want actual actionable behaviours. So, for example, one of the teams I worked with yesterday, one of their, actually 2 of their core behaviours were really simple things, but they said, explain the why. That has to be one of our behaviours. So many of the conflicts that come up between our teams are because we are giving instructions or asking people to do tasks or making decisions, and we're not communicating the why. If we all commit to explaining the why at any level, we're going to take out a whole heap of the conflict. So that was one of them. And another one of them that they came up with yesterday was assume positive intent. So many of us, we've got a negative bias. We assume people are out to get us, or they deliberately did that work poorly. So they said, if we all assume positive intent in the first instance, so it doesn't excuse poor behaviour, but we're going to assume that people come to work to do a good job. Some people don't do a good job, but is it their intention to deliberately do a bad job? Very, very rarely, folks. So they were 2 of the core behaviours that team came up with yesterday. And what I love about this work is, and they're coming up with another one as their third, is they're simple, they're practical, they're actionable. You're in a room together, so everyone's talking through what it looks like in practice. And then that gives you one, it allows the group to hold each other accountable. So it's not just up to the leader, but it also gives you a lever to pull as a leader because your team were part of coming up with these core behaviors. So now it is so much easier to have a conversation with a person through the stress of change about their behavior if you've had that clear conversation about expectations at the start. Now, you can do this. It doesn't have to be at the start. If you're listening to this podcast going, I've never had that sort of conversation with my team, you can do it. You can do it at any time. Hey, we've been working on this project for a while. We've never really talked about what that looks like and what our expectations are of these team meetings, for example. Let's talk that out. These are the conversations that matter, and they allow you to hold people accountable when the going gets tough.
And I always say when a team members hold each other accountable, that's when your team has achieved peak performance, because no longer do you need to worry about it. They're going to take care of each other. And I hate how everyone looks at accountability and looks at it through a negative lens. And it's actually a positive lens. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, hey, how come you didn't do your job? It's like, hey, do you need help? I noticed you haven't got the TPS report done, and it's due at 3, and it's 2:50 right now. Do you need help to get this thing done? That's accountability, right?
Yeah.
That is accountability. You're checking in with there's something that needs to get done. It looks like it's not going to get done on time. How might I help you? That is still accountability, and that's how your team hits peak performance.
Yeah, and the leading question that I ask before I get into that conversation about core behaviors, I ask the team, what do you want the experience of working in this team to be like? We spend so much time at work, whether it's, what do you want the experience of being in this team to be like? And we start there with the conversation, and then we go, okay, to be known for that and to have that experience, what do we actually need to do? What are a couple of and it's not a cover-all, it's just what are some of the top things that if we all did this, it would make a big difference. The 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. If we did these 3 things, it'd solve most of our issues. And you're spot on. When you frame it like that and they're in that positive space of this is the experience we want in our teams and in our workplace. And yep, if we do these things, it shifts accountability from, I'm being told I've been negative to people, or I haven't been communicating properly, and seeing that as a bad thing. You realize that your behavior contributes to that culture of the team. And if we're all striving to achieve that great place to work and that great team to be part of that has peak performance, then we all want to be on board in behaving in this way.
So amazing. So many great nuggets. Leah, this is such a fantastic conversation. I feel like we could keep going all night for me, all day for you. But unfortunately, all good things do come to an end. But before we wrap up here, I got 2 last questions for you. The first one is, according to you, Leah, what makes a great leader?
Leaders who lead themselves first. Yeah, leaders who lead themselves first, and leaders who care about their people. If you don't care about your people, you should not be a leader.
Yeah, I would argue you're not even one.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe in title only, but you actually are not one.
Correct. And then the final question of the show, how can people find you, follow you, be part of your journey? It's all about you right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that opportunity. So easiest way to find me is if you just plug into your search engine, Leah Mether. My name will be obviously on the podcast episode and in the show notes. Head to my website. I've got a YouTube channel where I answer people's questions every week. But I've also got 2 books to my name that you can find on all online platforms. So the first book is Soft is the New Hard, How to Communicate Effectively Under Pressure. And the second book is with that change leadership lens, Steer Through the Storm. Find that. I'm on social media as well under Leah Mether Speaker. Come find me. Tell me that you heard me on the podcast, and I'd love to have a conversation.
That's awesome. And for you, the listener, it's easy as always. All the links, all show notes are always in, or all the links are always in the show notes, every single show note, and we have the same structure. So go to leaddopeboss.com/the episode number, and then you'll be taken right there. So there we go. Again, Leah, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that, help me, help a friend, win-win all around, and hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.